Om Namo Narayana, Jai Swami Narayan, Namaste. Today we're starting chapter 20, studying the structure of the universe. The great sage Sukadeva Goswami said, "Hereafter I shall describe the dimensions, characteristics, and forms of the 6 islands, beginning with the island of Plaksha. As Sumeru mountain is surrounded by Jambudvipa, Jambudvipa is also surrounded by an ocean of salt water. The breadth of Jambudvipa is about 800,000 miles, and the breadth of the saltwater ocean is the same. As a moat around a fort is sometimes surrounded by a garden-like forest, the saltwater ocean surrounding Jambudvipa is itself surrounded by Plakshadvipa. The breadth of Plakshadvipa is twice that of the saltwater ocean. In other words, 1,600,000 miles. On Plakshadvipa there is a tree shining like gold, and as tall as the Jambu tree on Jambudvipa. At its root is a fire with 7 flames. It is because this tree is a Plaksha tree that the island is called Plakshadvipa. Plakshadvipa was governed by Idmajidva, one of the sons of Maharaja Priyavrata. He endowed the 7 islands with the names of his 7 sons, divided the islands among the sons, and then retired from active life to engage in the devotional service of the Lord. The 7 islands are named according to the names of those 7 sons: Shiva, Yavasa, Subhara, Shanta, Kesema, Amrita, and Abhaya. In those 7 tracts of land there are 7 mountains and 7 rivers. The mountains are called Manikuta, Vajrakuta, Indrasena, Chotisman, Subarna, Hiranyashriva, Meghamala, and the rivers are named Aruna, Nirimna, Angirashi, Savitri, Supatapta, Suptabhata, Ritanbara, and Satyambara. One can immediately be free from material contamination by touching or bathing in those rivers, and the 4 castes of people who live in Plakshadvipa, the Hamsas, Patangas, Udvayanas, and Satyangas, purify themselves in this way. The inhabitants of Plakshadvipa live for 1,000 years. They are beautiful like the demigods, and they also beget children like the demigods. By completely performing the ritualistic ceremonies mentioned in the Vedas and by worshipping Lord Vishnu as represented by the sun god, they attain the sun, which is the heavenly planet. This is the mantra by which the inhabitants worship the Supreme Lord. Let us take shelter of the sun god, who is the reflection of Lord Vishnu, the ever-expanding Supreme Personality of Godhead, the oldest of all persons. Vishnu is the only worshipable god. He is the Vedas, he is religion, and he is the origin of all auspicious and inauspicious results. Longevity, sensory prowess, physical and mental strength, intelligence and bravery are natural and equally manifest in all the inhabitants of the 5 islands headed by Plakshadvipa. Plakshadvipa is surrounded by an ocean of sugarcane juice, equal in breadth to the island itself. Similarly, there is another island, Saumaladvipa, twice as broad, at 3,200,000 miles, and surrounded by an equally broad body of water called Sarasagara, the ocean that tastes like liquor. On Saumaladvipa there is a Saumali tree from which the island takes its name. That tree is as broad and tall as the Plaksha tree. In other words, about 800 miles broad and 8,800 miles tall. Learned scholars say that this gigantic tree is the residence of Garuda, the king of all birds and carrier of Lord Vishnu. In that tree, Garuda offers Lord Vishnu his Vedic prayers. The son of Maharaja Priyavrata, named Yajnabahu, the master of Saumaladvipa, divided the island into 7 tracts of land, which he gave to his 7 sons. The names of those divisions, which correspond to the names of the sons, are Surokana, Saumanasya, Ramanaka, Devavarsha, Paribhadra, Apyayana, and Avijnata. In those tracts of land there are 7 mountains: Sivarsa, Shatashringa, Vamadeva, Kunda, Mukunda, Pushpa Varsha, and Saharsha Shruti. There are also 7 rivers: Anumati, Sinivali, Sarasvati, Kuhi, Rajani, Nanda, Raka, and they are all still existing. Strictly following the cult of Varnashrama Dharma, the inhabitants of those islands, who are known as Shrutidaras, Viradaras, Vasundaras, and Ishandaras, all worship the expansion of Lord Vishnu named Soma, moon god. The inhabitants of Samaladvipa worship the demigod of the moon in the following way. By his own rays, the moon god has divided the month into 2 fortnights, known as Shuka and Krishna, for the distribution of food grains to the Pitas and the demigods. The demigod of the moon is he who divides time, and he is the king of all the residents of the universe. We therefore pray that he may remain our king and guide, and we offer him our respectful obeisances. Outside of the ocean of liquor is another island known as Kushadvipa, which is about 6,400,000 miles wide, twice as wide as the ocean of liquor. As Shaumaladvipa is surrounded by a liquor ocean, Kushadvipa is surrounded by an ocean of liquid ghee as broad as the island itself. On Kushadvipa there are clumps of kusha grass, from which the island takes its name. This kusha grass, which was created by the demigods by the will of the Supreme Lord, appears like a second form of fire, but with very mild and pleasing flames. Its young shoots illuminate all directions. Another son of Maharaja Priyavrata, Hiranyarata, was the king of this island. He divided it into 7 parts, which he delivered to his 7 sons according to the rights of inheritance. The king then retired from family life to engage in austerities. The names of those sons are Vasu, Vasudana, Dridharayutsi, Stutyavrata, Nabhigupta, Vivikta, and Vamadeva. In those 7 islands there are 7 boundary mountains known as Kakra, Katrashringa, Kapila, Kitrakuta, Devanika, Udvaroama, and Dravina. There are also 7 rivers known as Ramakulya, Madhukulya, Mitravindra, Shrutravindra, Devagarbha, Gritya Kutya, and Mantramala. The inhabitants of the island of Kushadvipa are celebrated as the Kushalas, Kovidas, Abhiyutas, and Kulakas. They are like the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, respectively. By bathing in the waters of those rivers, they all become purified. They are expert in performing ritualistic ceremonies according to the orders of the Vedic scriptures. Thus they worship the Lord in his aspect as the demigod of fire. This is the mantra by which the inhabitants of Kushadvipa worship the fire god. O fire god, you are part of Lord Vishnu Hari, and you carry to him all the offerings of sacrifices. Therefore we request you to offer to Lord Vishnu the yajnik ingredients we are offering to the demigods, for the Lord is the real enjoyer. And we're actually going to pause here in this description. Excuse me, my light just went off. It's connected to my computer, which decided to take a rest. Some things I can edit out, but that I can't. I would like to turn now to Vyasadeva's Vedic Universe Part 2, Canto 5, the Radha Karana book that I've been looking at, because this is one of those chapters that sort of needs a little bit of explanation, and maybe he might give us some insight from his perspective on what this chapter means. I have only one thought, and that is, why so many 7s? Actually, it seems here that there is a bit of a mystery to this book, according to Radha. So I'm just going to read what he says. There are many people who know the exact meaning of Sukadeva's words, and many of these incarnated in India just 500 years ago, along with the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That they left Vyasadeva's codes unexplained indicates that these codes, essentially what we just read, were to remain intact until a specific time. So it seems that there is a bit of a mystery here. Are we seeing a description of the Earth in an earlier age that archaeology can't verify? Or is there more here? There is a book that actually talks about how the Vedas are more than just ritual and hymns, but actually within them is a code. So I'm going to bring up yet another book here that's really interesting. It's called The Celestial Key to the Vedas, Discovering the Origins of the World's Oldest Civilization by G.D. Siddharth. This is a really interesting book that literally goes through and points out things like how astronomy and ideas of astronomy are actually hidden in the Rig Veda. Let's see, a simple statement may not mean. Now I'm going to give you a hypothetical example. Let's see, that I remember from when I read this years ago. It describes how, like, Rudra let an arrow go from his bow at the same time that Indra let an arrow go, and the arrows crash. And in this book, archaeology has actually found that at a certain time there was like a solar eclipse, the dating of that solar eclipse, and when this Rigvedic event of the two arrows supposedly happened at the same time. And you can chart different events in the history of the world based on things in the Rig Veda. Now, how they came up with, like, these two arrows hit whatever, I'm using this as sort of a hypothetical example. This isn't actually a real one. But this book talks about how there is hints in here of things, but we don't quite get what they're saying. Rig Veda actually describes sort of the history of the Earth and the path of the moon and the planets and the sun, and it's all tucked in. It's really interesting, and I could go into this far more than I have time for. The reason I'm bringing this up is I'm wondering if that's what we have here in Canto 5. Do we have this code for other things? We just don't have the key to get into it to understand what it's talking about. He does say something interesting here. He says maybe he refers to in Canto 11 how heaven is a place that means goodness. So what we're talking about in this canto may be ideas of, well, this may not be a particular place that's being discussed here. It might be a place of goodness. Or when we talk about the sun and the moon, it may not refer to the actual moon or the actual sun. It might refer to a place of enjoyment or something. I don't know. I don't know. I'm lacking words as I'm reading through here. And it looks like I'm not really getting the answers out of this that I'm wanting to. Maybe you have some answers. Maybe you take this chapter literally, and this is a history of the creation of the world, and we just have to argue with scientists, like, why haven't you found evidence of this? That's for a whole nother discussion. Or maybe it is symbolic. I honestly, I'll be honest with you, I tend to fall a little bit into the symbolic territory, where, yes, sometimes we get histories of the world here and it may not correspond to science. Sometimes we may get histories that do correspond to science. I tend to fall into the symbolic category. I tend to think that maybe these things aren't definitive histories, they're symbolic of something else. So maybe when we say this mountain, we're not actually talking about a specific mountain that was created at a specific point on an island that's never been found. Maybe we're talking about some place. That's my thought, only because I think of books that I read, like, well, so many of us who have gone through the American school system know Moby Dick, which we may have been forced to read, and how heavy on symbolism that book was, to the point where your English teacher maybe drove you crazy with it, and it just killed the enjoyment. But if writers do that today to flesh out their stories, why wouldn't a writer of a spiritual book do the same thing? It feels to me like that is a very natural way of writing, and we know that there is symbolism here. So that's how I take it. And with that, as the video is going a little long, and if I keep talking, I feel like I might bring in yet another book. I'm just going to say thank you for watching. We will pick up next time, verse 18, perhaps finish up the chapter in the next video. So thank you for watching. Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Swami Narayan. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.